Hi, everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything, from products to businesses to entire industries. I'm Bryan McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal. Today, we have reached a day that we've anticipated for a long time. It is the effective end to cable television as we know it. At least it is according to Demetrius, who messaged me early this morning about the arrival of the end of times. The reason? Data showing more people are streaming now than using cable? No, not at all. It's that his mother has made the decision to cut the cord. Good morning, D. How you doing?
I am doing fantastic because I never thought this day was going to come. My mother was so entrenched in cable television and watching cable television. She was not have the normal attraction to kind of a lot of the big streaming shows. It didn't fit her use case at all. But when she came to me and she said, "Hey, it is time, or I'm interested in getting rid of cable. What would that take?" I was both a bit shocked and very happy because we have actually, you and I both, since the beginning, since 2000, I want to say 6 or 7, we were working on streaming content in a variety of ways, from content generation to how that it gets distributed, from software, hardware, control devices, everything. I mean, we were doing things on streamers 10 years ago, right? Before it
Yep.
even became a thing. So this was all of our work coming to fruition and landing on my mother's doorstep, and it made me feel as though I had finally accomplished something.
She's kind of like a canary in the coal mine. The fact is that she's very much a laggard when it comes to technology, and whenever she wants to pick something up, we're always both kind of shocked. We're like, "Oh, okay, your mom's really
Yeah,
wanting to get into this now, or she heard about this and wants to try it out." And this is kind of like a big one because cable is one of those things where it drives me nuts because it all comes down to live television in reality.
hmm,
Because if you don't have access to live television and you're used to it, it feels very it feels very uncomfortable to not be able to access the news or things like that very quickly instead of having to like look it up on YouTube or use some sort of channel or down or even download a streaming channel onto your service, whether you're using Roku or something else. So this is kind of a big step forward, but can you provide a little bit of like a background? So like if we were doing research, right, we would have the backgrounds of the people that we're going to visit and learn about how they use technology and stuff like that. Give everyone an idea of what it looks like to break down the background of your mom.
yeah. So my mom actually, I was born and raised in Silicon Valley. She was also born and raised in Silicon Valley, but when she was born here, it was called the Valley of the Heart's Delight. So there was all farmland and everything. Everything was, there's a deep agricultural background in Silicon Valley that people might not be aware of. So she got started working in tech at a young age. I think she was in her 20s at the time. She worked in tech for 30 years. And at the time when she got in, it wasn't huge. It was the very, very early stages of growth. So she was able to retire in her 50s. And since she retired, she wants nothing to do with tech. She hasn't had a computer in her home decades now. She just got a smartphone finally a couple years ago because there weren't really good feature phones available anymore, and my sister in law talked her into it. She only got a tablet like a year ago or so. She refuses to text message. She gets text messages and doesn't and just doesn't look at them. Yesterday I went through her text messages and I was like, "Oh, hey, so and so sent you this photo." She's like, "Oh, that's nice. That's from like 6 months ago." And she's like, she has email, she doesn't check it, any of those kinds of things. So she wants to be outdoors, she wants to be in nature, she wants to be talking to people. She does not want to be staring at a screen at all. In fact, she only uses Siri to interact with her phone, or Siri or other voice assistants, because she now has an Android phone too. But it was something that I thought, also considering her use case, this is pretty key also. So unlike a lot of us who are like me personally, I almost exclusively watch scripted kind of high end TV things like The Last of Us or Chernobyl or Breaking Bad because there's so much stuff out there. I don't really bother to watch a lot of like reality TV or live TV other than sports, and I'll probably watch the Oscars coming up, but that's it. There's she's the opposite. So she actually has TVs in multiple rooms and she just has them playing content all day long. They're usually tuned to the same channel. She has them all on as background noise, and she's addicted to cable channels like HGTV and similar stuff where they're talking about like again home and garden, getting outdoors, that kind of stuff. But she's not really into like the. She's not going to watch the Queen's Gambit or anything like that.
Okay.
So for the longest time, I was thinking to myself, all right, well, it's not the technology's not quite there for live TV. The live TV channels started coming out, but the interface, the she wouldn't be able to use the interfaces in that style of then having to cast from your phone or controlling it from a separate device. She would need something pretty similar to the old stuff. So I just kind of sat on it and I waited. Plus, talking my mom into anything is a challenge. Like she makes up her mind and kind of sticks with it. But I think that now that things have started to change and that it's a great opportunity for her, and it's also one of the things like if she's doing it, then I imagine the vast majority of people are out there are got to be on the verge.
Absolutely. I have a question though. What type of televisions does she have? Are they like smart televisions or like older televisions?
She actually does have some smart televisions because her older televisions crapped out on her.
Yeah.
So she has a couple smart TVs. She never uses a smart TV feature. She just kind of uses the cable. The smart TVs are mostly for like, me or my brother's family with their kids come over and they want to watch some YouTube or something. It's
Mhm.
the only time that stuff gets used.
Why does she like cable television? I'm just curious because I have feedback from my parents and other people why they have preferred cable television up to this point.
It's literally just the content. So she, again, she'll put on HGTV or some of the other home and garden TV shows. She'll watch Rachel Maddow on a regular basis. She wants to be able to see that. But she's been kind of stuck in this live show model for such a long time. And plus, she loves having sound going on around the house. She hates a quiet house. So she's been doing this for a long time. And then she's been kind of stuck in this process. And she didn't want to learn. She didn't want to learn how to use some of these other streaming systems. She doesn't want to engage. I think it makes her annoyed that she has to use kind of a tech interface when she doesn't want to anymore. She's kind of
Yeah.
fully done with the tech life. So those are all things. But ultimately, what happened was, and I asked her why. She said it's too expensive. She was paying. So she had TVs, cable boxes in 3 different rooms,
Oh,
and
okay.
she
So you
had
pay and you pay
upgrades.
monthly for those cable boxes, if I remember right, right?
Yeah, you
Yeah. Okay.
pay a. So she's paying for those 3 cable boxes. She's paying a modem for the house, and she had upgrades. She had channels she probably didn't use very much, like HBO and Stars, because when it first got set up, it was just one of those bundles, and then it never got
Mhm.
changed. So at one point, I'm sure it was significantly less, but then after that promotional period wore off, she was paying $300 a month.
Wow. Yeah, and they don't call you to let you know that it's no longer available. They just start charging you the new fee.
Yeah. So if you're not paying attention, and she doesn't really, then she would never know. So when she came to me and she asked me, I thought to myself, okay, well, I believe you can get all of the live TV streaming from Hulu and Sling and YouTube and uh, plenty of other options out there. I was just interested in were they going to have the channels that she was really cared about. So I went and looked for it because I don't track HGTV and determine where it's available. And it's available on all of his different services now. So she wouldn't lose any content by going over. So I checked all of the channels that she mentioned. I checked them all on YouTube TV because I thought it might be the easiest for her to use, and they're all on there. Then what I've done recently, I bought one of the new Chromecasts with Google TV for an older TV that I inherited. That's a nice 65-inch OLED, And I thought the interface on it with the remote control was absolutely fantastic, and it's customizable. So it would be because what she would need is an interface that is familiar to her for her to navigate the grid and get to her channels and leave it up playing in 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 several different places.
Hmm.
I didn't think it was ready until this new Chromecast with Google TV came out, and I'm sure Roku was probably pretty similar and some of the other options that are out there. But I think this ultimately, and the nice thing also is that you can program the uh, the Chromecast remote to turn your TV on and off,
Hmm.
like a universal remote, and also it has shortcut buttons to whatever you want to go to. So I can actually program one of the shortcut buttons to take her directly to YouTube TV. She doesn't have to do anything else. She goes
So does
directly.
YouTube TV now? I mean, I know you and I looked at this for a long time, but I
Mhm.
haven't looked in the last year. Does YouTube TV have all the basic channels that you would get for normal cable? Like, meaning she's in the Bay Area, so that's like Bay Area NBC and like CBS and Fox Sports and stuff like that.
Yeah, it includes most of the channels that you think of when it comes to cable TV. So it's going to have your local channels and the networks. It's going to have the expanded basic stuff, the TNTs, the USA's, the MSNBCs and Fox News, and all those fundamental channels.
Okay.
And you can also upgrade through there, so you can get Showtime and Stars and HBO through there if you want to, if you don't want to go the HBO Max route. And it's a great experience. You can, for things that you might want to sign up for, like HBO Max and I believe Netflix and some of the others, if you have a Gmail account that has your payment information saved there, which
Hmm.
I do because it's probably more secure than pulling out a credit card half the time. Then, if you want to sign up for one of those, you can go into the pre-installed app that's on there, or you can download the app if it's not installed, and you
Hmm.
can sign up for a membership directly within the TV interface. You don't have to go anywhere else, and you can get going as quickly as you want.
That's kind of key, right? I mean, at the end of the day, right? Like every time you leave the interface, especially for somebody who is not as like bought into tech as we are, then it just discourages them to want to use the platform.
Yeah, I
If
mean,
it's as simple as keeping everything within the same square, so to speak,
mhm.
then
Yeah.
they're less likely to bail from the install process.
Yeah, and I've had YouTube TV before, and I've canceled it because they were adding channels I didn't care about and raised the price, and it was just like this is no longer the cost value to me isn't there anymore, and it's super easy to cancel. If I wanted to cancel HBO on her cable subscription,
Uh huh.
I don't even know entirely how I would do that. I think I have to go into the Xfinity website and dig through. And every time you go to a different part of the website, it loads an entirely new page and you have to log in again. It's a terrible experience. I don't even know how I do it. I have to dig around. If she asks me like, "Oh, I'm paying for HBO on my cable. I want to cancel that, but keep my cable," I'm like, "All right, well, let me carve out some time and figure out how that's done. Maybe I even have to call call Comcast and convince them to let her cancel that." But the important thing was because she did this, and her and my partner are off, talking, and she was actually doing her hair. So I crunched all the numbers, did all the research. She would want two different Chromecasts and pay for an internet connection plus YouTube TV, and maybe she'll add something on later. But the upfront cost for two Chromecasts for 1080p, because she doesn't have any 4K TVs in the room, and her TVs are all like 30 inches, so that like 4K doesn't make a difference for her.
Yeah.
$30 up front for two Chromecasts. They're super simple to set up. They're tiny. Just go back on the back of your TV. You can get rid of your unnecessarily large cable boxes. $60 up front and about $120 a month for an internet connection, a pretty decent internet connection, plus the $65 a month for YouTube TV. Comes out to about $120 a month relative to the $300 a month. I did the math where I told her you're going to save $2,000 a year by making the switch, and you're not going to lose it on any content.
See, that's crazy. That I mean, I don't think most people know that because I think it's a convenience thing. It's like, well, it's already set up. I know how to use it. I'm just going to leave it and continue to pay the bill. I had a friend tell me that they spent $500 a month at one point
Oh,
on
yeah.
content when they had every channel. And then my uncle, I think he told me he paid like somewhere between $350 and $400 a month because he had like a sports package and everything, plus the cable, plus the everything. And it was like, this is
Yeah.
ridiculous, right? Like these prices are insane. And believe it or not, I was looking it up. A lot of people subscribe to these services, and I think it's just because they don't understand what's available right now, right?
Yeah. I think that's part of it. And the reality is, because again, we worked on this stuff. We've tried just about everything out because that was part of the job. Uh, and I didn't know to the extent in which things have progressed because our focus more we've been spending more time on metaverse and crypto stuff more recently. Not to mention AI, all that kind of stuff. We haven't been as deeply integrated into the streaming stuff as we were when things were coming up.
Mm-hmm.
But things have continued to progress. One of the biggest ways in which that's done that is now just about everything is available on streaming, including sports, which was for the longest time the big rock in the way, right? It was the big roadblock was getting live sports, but that's not the case anymore.
No, and you're what you're talking about too is, I mean, I think that there's like an undercurrent to this entire thing that we're not even mentioning, which is that a lot of this stuff is bound up in this way because of licensing agreements. So a lot of these
Yes.
different organizations and everything, that are connected to this sport and that sport and all these things, they pay licensing fees to local television to be able to show the content in their local area and do all this kind of stuff. And some of the executives that you and I had talked to just casually at a conference actually said, if you think about it, part of the whole process of transitioning from cable to streaming is understanding how to unconnect all of the legal agreements and then rewrite new agreements that cover digital assets versus these traditional old analog assets.
Yeah, and it's a
And
huge
that's
challenge.
true. There's a legal
Yeah,
aspect to all this.
it's a huge thing, and I remember working with somebody who's developing some streaming content and trying to get some other people's content on board, and it was related to sports, and one of the issues was that all of the content rights were not just locked up within like national licensing agreements, but regional. So if he was trying to set up a new national and international agreement, and they had to work it out with all the different regional uh, license holders in order to figure out how to do that, and it became essentially impossible.
Yeah. I mean, and there's only a couple ways you can kind of handle that. One is you can slowly but surely start updating your agreements and having those conversations. And then the other one is what some of these big tech companies have done, like Amazon and stuff, where you just go and buy the entire company. And then essentially you can rewrite your agreements or reestablish your agreements once you kind of own the entity. But, most companies don't do that. I mean, that's more of like big tech and stuff. But I have another question. So, there's this other hack that people have been doing as well, and I have at least two or three family members that do this, which is you essentially get the antenna, the HD TV antenna
Mhm.
from Amazon or from back in the old days, you get it from like Radio Shack or whatever. And then you screw that into your cable connection on the back of your television. You scan for channels, and then you can pick up all of the local channels. Did
Yeah,
you consider doing that at all?
we did not. There's a couple things that I think I've tried this before, and it can kind of work. The issue that I ran into is that because of the way that the broadcast antennas are currently set up in the Bay Area,
Uh huh.
um, large parts of San Jose are don't get certain channels because the there's that hill in I want to say in San Bruno.
Hmm.
It creates like a void, a broadcast void for certain channels that are coming from the radio towers in San Francisco. So there were certain channels I just couldn't get, and then you were a lot of times trying to finagle it and move it around and those kinds of things, and it just didn't provide the kind of quality that I
Well,
wanted.
I'll tell you where the biggest problem is, especially for somebody
What's
who's
that?
not used to hacking around with tech, is the fact that once you're in on like let's say HDMI one or HDMI two, and that's what your Chromecast is connected to. In
Hmm.
order to watch those other channels, you actually have to switch it to cable, and
Yeah,
then you have to use a different remote control to control the channels.
yeah, it's just kind of annoying. Like
Yeah.
the use case is or the usability behind it is like you can get by if there's like something you really want to watch, like some kind of a live event or something. But I wouldn't really want to live my life that way when it
I
comes to
use it every year for the Super
yeah,
Bowl and for the Oscars. Only
yeah,
twice a year. I pull it out twice a year. It's really funny. I plug it in. You got this big old cables hanging. We watch
yeah,
those two shows. I wrap it up. I put it back in the box and I put it in the closet.
yeah. So one thing is that and I'll have to talk to my mom about this and explain this, is that now we are kind of in a world where if she wants access to a lot of the stuff more on demand,
Uh huh.
she has access to live TV, and but if she wants to watch like Star Trek Picard on demand, and The Last of Us, even though she would never watch The Last of Us, if she wanted to watch those shows on demand as opposed to through a live streaming option like through the YouTube TV, then that's an additional subscription. Now, the nice thing about that, and what I think a lot of people are doing, is that you can rotate subscriptions. So you can sign up for
Mm.
Netflix for 2 months or 3 months or however long you want it to be, or I think it's broken down into months though. You can sign up for Netflix for a month or two, watch all the shows that you want to that's built up over that time frame, and then cancel it and switch over to Paramount Plus or whatever it is. I think a lot of people are doing that, and with the interface thing that I described about kind of the YouTube TV and I imagine, or that Google TV, and I imagine that other people are going to be copying that, where you can just order directly from within, order and cancel from directly within that interface.
Hmm.
It's super easy to do that now.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, we should probably talk a little bit about the kind of broader state of the union on cable and streaming because there actually has been a lot that has happened. But I wanted to mention something. So we talked about this on maybe one or two of our early podcasts. Is that you and I had the great opportunity very early on, like you said, whatever it was, 2007, 2008,
Oh yeah,
when companies started looking at this stuff. And you and I were sitting in the houses of people who took laptops and connected HDMI cables to televisions and pressed play on that and then plug in their speakers. And they were trying to make this work before it even really existed.
yes.
Well, about 8 years ago, which would be what, 2015, you and I were conducting research in this space like we normally do. And I remember the current HBO CEO at the time was given a talk on CNBC. And he was talking about streaming. And here is what he said. And I wanted to bring this up so you and I can have this conversation because you actually sent me this link 8 years ago. And I think it'd be really fun for our audience to listen.
We don't think it's going to cannibalize our business at all. We think it's going to be additive. We want to work with our partners to go after a big broadband-only audience in the United States. As you know, there are currently 10 million broadband-only homes in the United States, growing probably to 12 or 15. We think there's a big opportunity to market HBO with our partners there. And listen, we've done a lot of research. There are 10 to 15 million homes out there which we think are receptive to HBO. We want to work with our partners to go get that audience, and we'll work with new partners as well. But this is not going to be cannibalistic of our current business. We think it's additive. We think it's great for HBO. We think it's good for the industry, and we obviously think it's terrific for the.
If you listen to that clip, what he's basically saying is they didn't see streaming as like a primary service offering back then.
Mhm.
They basically saw it as just kind of this additive service. And here we are today, and the tables have turned, right?
Yeah, I think that one of the things he said back then is that cable cord cutting isn't really a thing. It's this like side thing that a few people are doing, but it's not going to be never be mainstream. And I remember hearing that and thinking like, oh, he has either not seen the data that I've seen, or he just wants to make everybody feel good and feel like, okay, well, we don't have to make any major changes, so don't worry. But yeah, at the time, it's now the other way around, I would say, and it's now their cable channel that is additive, and it's their HBO Max that is doing the majority of their business.
Yeah, and to be fair, like we got to put ourselves in his position back then, okay? So the majority of cable subscribers were very happy like with the cable that was being delivered to them. And we didn't have the same heavy like streaming content options that we have now, right? So basically as tech
Well,
continued to drop these options in, right, it became
mhm.
more enticing.
I would challenge that. I wouldn't say I would not characterize it as happy. I would say that they were satisfied at the
Okay.
time because it was ultimately the best option available. Even back in 2015, I think the options were largely YouTube and Netflix and maybe a couple other kind of upstarts, maybe Crunchyroll or something like that. but it was still kind of getting started. Although it wasn't too much longer after that, I think that YouTube TV became a thing.
What always shocks me, though, D, is because you and I work in a space where we're looking at bleeding edge technology and then cutting edge technology and then mainstream technology,
Hmm.
is that you and I will see bleeding edge technology and see most of it disappear. Then we'll see cutting edge technology and we'll know that it's going to overtake the current technology within 10 years. And the majority of companies and executives will see that data and go, that's years and years off. And then suddenly, the
Yeah,
coin gets flipped. And here we are 10 years later, and suddenly they're kind of chasing their tail and trying to catch up, right? This happens all the time in our work. And in this particular case, I mean, it really has shooken the industry, right? Because if you look at Netflix and what Amazon has done, and now, Apple TV has a lot of really popular shows on it. It's like tech television. I'll call it tech TV. Tech
yeah.
TV is really kind of hammering the market.
Yeah, it's been one of the things where we looked at it back, I want to say 2008 or so is when we were doing a lot of that ethno that you mentioned. And we saw, okay, the technology is there. Yeah, the capability for the technology to deliver the experience is there. The user experience around it and the interfaces, the content rights, all those things need to get hashed out, and that's going to take years. But, and I'm sure a lot of these executives looked at this and said, "Oh, this is going to take years for this to work out." But the thing is, those years passed fast. And in order to kind of develop and get all these things kind of in place, you can't wait till the last minute and sprint through it. You have
Mhm.
to get the ball rolling pretty early to get all this stuff done. Especially a lot of this stuff. There's hardware that's involved. There's massive content libraries. There's digital distribution, which is something that you need to set up. There's a lot of net ops that are involved with that. It's not something that you flip a switch on. And we've seen streamers out there launch when they weren't ready, and it became a huge problem for them.
Absolutely, yeah. And last year, 2022, I think it was July, Nielsen reported that the number of streamers versus cable users, uh, number of streamers surpassed cable users. It was like
Yeah,
34.8 million to 34.4 million or something like that. And it was that moment in time where you and I saw it and we were like, okay, there we go. Now it's the beginning of the end. Like we're going to keep moving
yeah.
forward and everything's going to be streaming and digital.
So I'm going to give a quick State of the Union from the data perspective of what's kind of been going on. So we know that streaming services have continuing to grow. I think when Disney Plus came on board, that gave a big shot in the arm for people who weren't lured by Netflix, were then lured by Disney Plus, HBO Max. Then you had some of the other channels, Paramount Plus, and Peacock, and all those. So it became the point where almost anybody had at least one. Right, it became very common. At the same time as those numbers have been going up, cable TV subscribers are steadily dropping. We saw data that said that since 2019, and we'll post all these links on the YouTube page if you want to go and actually read what they have to say. Since 2019, cable TV subscribers have been steadily dropping. They're losing roughly 6 million subscribers a year. So since what's that now 5 years? It's around 30 million subscribers in that time frame. And despite that, despite losing all their subscribers and all these kinds of things, they're still extremely expensive. And the average cost is over $200 a month. And for quite a while, it was the most expensive utility. I think
Wow.
now that energy costs have gone crazy, they've kind of overtaken them again. But people are spending their largest household fees for a long time was going to their cable subscription.
That's nuts. I mean, that
Yeah,
that really is nuts when you think about it, right? You got heating, electricity, you got, gas, you got all these different things that you're paying for, and the most expensive one is the ability to watch television.
yeah. And a lot of these live TV services are a fraction of that. So $65 for YouTube TV, some of them are 50 or less. That's a quarter of the price. And maybe they're not getting all of the channels, but like you can only watch one channel at a time. It's not like you can really pay attention. I guess you can. Some people can do picture in picture, but I don't think that experience ever took off here. It's not like you were going to be watching, a soccer match and I don't know, Stranger Things at the same time, right? just not compatible
I
experiences.
remember when that was a big thing. That's funny that you mentioned that. I forgot all about that, but I remember when
Mhm.
it was the whole thing was, hey, guess what? You can have like 2 or 3 pictures so you can watch 3 games at one time. And people are just like, wow, it's kind of overwhelming. Like you have one
Yeah,
television and you got a bunch of little boxes everywhere.
yeah. There's plenty of these edge cases, and that we see it all the time that people develop technology, and we're just like, yeah, but who wants that? It comes up. You mentioned that streaming services had surpassed cable TV as far as user base in 2022.
Yep.
What I saw is that as of 2023, as of right now, it- streaming services have a 20% 20% advantage,
Woo.
78% to 56% as far as the installed base.
That's
So
crazy.
obviously, there's a lot of overlap, and a lot of those people who have cable TV are also going to have streaming services. But it sounds like there's a big, substantial amount of people who have cable services, but they or have streaming services without cable, and that includes me. So we cut cable in this house. I want to say over 10 years ago.
Oh, us too. I mean, it was so
Yeah,
long ago that I don't even remember what it's like to have a cable box. Like it was
yeah,
very early. I think it was Roku 1 when I finally cut the cord.
yeah. We cut it quite a while ago, and we've been going strictly streaming for a very long time. I mean, we ultimately don't really watch that much TV, maybe an hour or two a night, and then uh, quite a bit of just like filling in the gaps just comes from YouTube. But since you haven't been on cable for quite a while, let me kind of refresh your memory because I had this experience yesterday when I was at my mom's house and I was trying to find something to watch. Uh, in a word, the cable experience sucks. So they have a lot of channels. In fact, they have way too many channels. I went in, there were literally thousands of channels. Like we were just like your channel 3, channel 7, channel 44. I turned on the TV. I was like, I don't want to watch HGTV. I want to watch something else. It was on like channel 1117. And I was like, this is ridiculous. So I'm going through the guide and I'm trying to find stuff to watch. And it's like, all right, well, here's 5 different HGG TV channels and here's 7 different ESPNs. And, and there's the Ocho. And then you get into 8 different TNTs. And it's just like, oh, hey, I'm watching Two Broke Girls for 12 hours straight. Because that's might as well just rename this to that channel. And there were tons of that. There's like, oh, there's apparently an NCIS channel and there's all these kinds of things and it just goes on forever. I'm like, it was finding something to watch just took a crazy amount of time because there were just so many options. It was completely disorganized. And then because it wasn't strictly at 1 p.m. or 2 or 1:30, if I watched anything, I was going to start in the middle. I was just going to start in the middle of it. Plus, on top of that, if you're watching a movie or something, which you're used to nowadays with streaming, you're just watching a movie. Now you've got commercials that are cut in. The movie's edited down so it doesn't have like any bad language or anything like that. And it's just it feels so bad. And then there are times when you're watching certain stuff like you mentioned the Oscars or the
Super
Super Bowl.
Bowl.
Let me tell you, the commercials that you get for daytime TV on a Sunday, and I'm sure it's worse like during the week, are not the same quality of the commercials you get during the Super Bowl. These are a lot of like cash for gold or like have you been rear-ended by somebody's company vehicle? You can sue them with our ambulance chasers. It's bad. And then you're seeing the same things over and over again. And then the last thing that I noticed is that with the recent cancellation, even with the recent cancellation binge with streaming, because I think a lot of people we talked about this on previous episodes, but a lot of these streamers just went overboard on loading content onto their platforms, and they've been doing too much, so they're cutting back. Even then, all the studios are shifting all of their production resources to streaming.
Mm.
So this stunned me. I was curious, so I looked it up. Last year, of the 8 shows nominated for Best Comedy for the Emmys, only 2 of them came from a network or cable channels. The
Wow.
exact same thing for drama. Only 2 of them came from a network or a cable channel, including AMC, for example, that had Better Call Saul. The rest, and I'm lumping HBO and HBO Max into a streaming on this case because HBO Max is where I think a lot of people are watching this. The rest of them are every single one of them. We've got Ted Lasso, you've got Stranger Things, you've got all these shows that are developed and released directly on streaming platforms. They're dominating the award scene now.
Yeah, I mean, I heard this before. I think last year they had the same thing. They were like shocked on the number of like streaming services that ended up having nominations versus non-streaming services. And I'm like, hey, it's just a matter of time. You know, they're pumping a ton of money and resources into these streaming services, and they're producing pretty great shows. I mean, it was a slow start for a lot of them, but now I think they're producing some really good stuff.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you, with my mom now officially cutting the cord,
Uh-huh.
I currently don't know anyone, or at least no one that I can think of, who has a cable subscription, including my family members that are in their 70s and 80s.
Mm.
Do you know anybody who does, and why are they keeping it if they are?
So I do know one family that does, and they have both. So it's not like
Mhm.
they just have one over the other. And the only reason why they keep the cable is because they want to have quick access to local news. So they're essentially paying, like you said, like hundreds of dollars a month to have like NBC Universal. I mean, not NBC. What was the local one here? NBC Bay Area.
Yeah,
I think that's what it's called. But anyways, to pay for NBC Bay Area, which is really interesting because they're paying all that money to the cable provider, but that money is not going to NBC,
yeah.
right? So
Well,
it's interesting.
yeah. I mean, they're getting. I think they make their money through advertising. I don't think they get paid by Comcast. I think all that money goes directly to Comcast.
Yeah, but if you just think about it though, like you're like, oh, I'm going to pay X hundreds of dollars per month so I can watch a few local television channels.
Yeah,
Right. So it's like if you went directly to those television channels, you can pay them directly, but you don't. You go to the Comcast cable package. But it's a
mhm.
convenience thing. It's the idea that I hit one button on that remote and suddenly I'm watching channel 2 or channel 3.
Yeah,
And we have to help people get past that so they can reduce their bills and pay less. I
yeah.
imagine there was a huge uptick of streaming subscribers during the lockdown of the pandemic when people were mostly home because of all these great shows were still continuing to be released. I also wonder that if we do end up having a slow kind of economic time, I don't want to use the R word, in the next 12 months or so, if you're going to see another uptick of people using streaming services because they're cheaper.
I think it's going to swing back that route. I think part of it is for the streamers, like we said before, they went a little bit too far, too fast with the amount of content they put on there. A lot of it wasn't the highest quality. So then you had a lot of the shows out there, lots of like Is It Cakes out there that were just like not very good. And they saw that the viewership wasn't that great, and they're going to need to figure that out because there's definitely things that need to get figured out with the streaming experience. But what you said, what about like you press one button and you're watching, the 6 o'clock news with uh, Chromecast, the new Chromecast programmable buttons. I can now set that up for my mom. So she
That's
just turns on the
awesome.
TV, hit this button, bam, you're watching Rachel Maddow or HGTV. Just push of one button, or you're just in that grid experience where you can now navigate to the channel you want to watch, and you don't have thousands of channels to dig through in order to
How
get to
long
the.
has she been switched over?
She hasn't yet. We haven't even done it yet. She literally asked me to do it on Sunday, this past Sunday. So I've ordered the Chromecast. We got them coming. I've got to talk to figure out what it would take to cancel the her Comcast subscription because that's always fun. And then get that all done. But
I
yeah,
actually, when it came to broadband cable, to be honest with you, I actually
mhm.
cut the broadband that came from Comcast because it kept going out all the
Oh yeah,
time and
remember
kept
that.
raising the bills. And then I ended up going with another service locally. So I'll pass that on to you because it has, knock on wood, never gone down. The bill never changes. No one ever talks to me. Everything always works. And that's all I care about.
Yeah, I still have Comcast. You sent me the one before. I think it was Sonic, but it's not
Sonic, yeah.
available. It's not available where I am. I was hoping for the longest time eventually to get to like Google Fiber, but then Google Fiber got killed, and I think I think that Comcast and a lot of the cable companies had a lot to do with that, with some legal action and stuff, in the ways that they suppress competition.
I also read too that a lot of these companies are now starting to put their investments into satellite, including Google, like meaning like they're
Mhm.
investing into trying to build a satellite option and kind of just get around all these cables in the streets type of thing. So we'll
Yeah.
see if that kind of unfolds in the next couple of years, because I feel like that might be an option if you have a satellite dish on everybody's house, but it actually is true broadband. You know what I mean? It's actually very, very fast.
It would be interesting. I mean, there's the question of space junk and how much it costs, and the environmental cost of lots of launches into space. But that also carries with it just greater reach for people who are out in rural areas that can now have access to broadband, or people who are like, a lot of people who get lost hiking and stuff,
Yeah,
that now they could have a lifeline for help when they would otherwise be unavailable through terrestrial communications.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
So let me ask you one last question. How much longer do you think until the death of cable is fully completed and we are throwing dirt on the grave?
See, this is actually a hard one because I know that there are tied up legal agreements that are very long. So a lot of these companies that sign these agreements are like a decade long and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like cable as we know it, the like kind of like I have a box and all that kind of stuff in front of me, and I pay for that every month, and that whole experience that your mom had, I think that
Mhm.
could be done by 2028.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be by 2028. I agree with you. It's going to be mostly done. I think they're going
Yeah,
to have some people who are just hanging on with inertia, who aren't that concerned about the money because they're fine with money. Um, I think the biggest factor is what you said with all these contracts.
yeah,
So a lot of these contracts, they run for about 10 years or so, yeah, I think 7 to 10 years. I think 10 years from now, this is my prediction. So, was this 2023? We'll find out in 2033. I think 10 years from now, all those contracts will be expired. The cable companies will look at this and say, you know what, we still have people subscribing to it, and apparently they love their cable, but it's no longer makes financial sense for us. We're actually taking a loss on still operating the cable side of the business. So we're going to shut it down. I think this is. I think it's going to hang on past 2028 as just like this legacy product, like the Netflix DVDs. They still do
hmm
that to you. They will mail you DVDs still.
I know, and
Uh,
it's actually a decent business. I was looking at the
yeah.
financials of it, and they actually do okay still.
Well, it's pretty cheap to mail DVDs. They've worked out a lot of deals with the post office, and they're actually helping to support the post office, I believe. But I think that at some point they're just going to say, "Nope, shut it down." Where we have our Xfinity streaming app now, and you can use that. That's competing with YouTube TV, and we're not going to run this expensive side of the business anymore. We're just going to run for as a telecom. We're providing wireless and broadband internet service to everybody's homes, and we are otherwise out of the cable TV business.
Yeah, I think it'll happen. You know, the other option was the middle option, which is that someone like Comcast decides, okay, we're going to have everybody turn in their boxes, and then we're going to hand them this tiny little device that screws into their cable connection that they plug into their HDMI connector, and
Uh-huh.
essentially that's their own streaming device,
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me if they have
and
their
just do it
own
for free.
competitor
So
to Chromecast. That's what I would do if I were them. I would
yeah,
have my own
just
competitor
do
to
the free model,
Chromecast.
right? Just give it
Yeah,
away, and now every single person that was a cable owner is now a streamer for you.
yeah. But then you would have all the competition for the streaming boxes from Comcast, from Fox, from all the different cable
Oh
companies,
yeah.
alongside the other ones, and they're far behind. I think from a development standpoint.
Yeah, it's a tough play for sure, but it's kind of that middle ground option. But you know, they're the ones that have the customers right now, so I would do everything in my power to find a way to transition my customer rather than lose them.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So, anyways, this was fun. I'm glad we were able to do this. Thank your mom for inspiring us to come back onto this topic. And thanks to everyone who listened today. Really appreciate it. Like I've mentioned many times, we're going to keep saying that throughout the year, is that we post all of our updates on our YouTube channel. That's at the X Podcast, at the X Podcast. So please subscribe on YouTube if you happen to check out our channel. Also, if you like this podcast and found it interesting or informative, it helps us a great deal if you subscribe or leave a review on whatever platform you choose to use. Thanks again, everyone, and we will see you all next week.